Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel, and in today's review I'm going to be taking a look at the Wei Jiang Hide Shadow Set B MPM styled Blackout. This is essentially an upscaled and enhanced version of the Studio Series Leader Class Blackout, and it looks absolutely fantastic. Now before I begin this review, for those of you who are in the market for picking up this enormous Blackout figure, then I definitely recommend that you should check out Shouzi's store, and for that there will be links down in the description box below. I do believe Shouzi currently has this figure on sale, particularly the Set B version. So definitely, if you are in the market for this figure, get on board that sale and purchase this figure now via the links down in the description box below. You can see here that this is an absolute enormous rendition of how Blackout appeared in that Michael Bay 2007 Transformers movie. Now this essentially does borrow many elements that the original Leader Studio Series version did. However, it improves upon and adds some different elements in order to make this more of a masterpiece styled scaled figure and just overall aesthetic. Now some of the more noticeable differences are that these sections here are now in fact covered. This used to be hollow on the Studio Series version. We now have actual rolling rubber wheels on the base of the helicopter, and this front one does in fact rotate, which is super cool. This whole section here is able to actually extend and retract depending on if you have it in helicopter mode or in robot mode. There are so many enhances throughout this figure as well, particularly in the base. If I just collapse Blackout's wings so that we can take a look on the underside, we can see here that the entire underside of this Wei Jiang Hide Shadow is completely covered via all of these different panels. Now I do believe that you only get these panels if you do buy the Set B version, which comes with the miniature diorama of the desert battle, as well as comes with some small army miniature figures and Scorponoks. This particular figure is the Set B version, so if you do purchase this, you do get this entire cover on the base of the helicopter, which I think looks absolutely fantastic. And quite honestly, without seeing all of these different ridges and grooves, you'd probably be convinced that this figure couldn't in fact transform. It does hold together incredibly well. One thing to notice is that due to perhaps some sunlight exposure, some of the pieces on this have discolored. You can see here that this piece of plastic is slightly different shade of plastic compared to this color. You can see some of this throughout the hinge joints. It's mainly just the hinge joints, so this may even just be a variation in what plastic they use for the hinges, but that is definitely something to be wary of, as I don't recall having these discolorations when I first got this figure in hand. The propeller can also spin fantastically well, and you can see due to the might that it spins, the actual figure itself does actually rock ever so slightly, so he is definitely picking up some momentum when spinning, so that is super cool to see. And once again, he can roll on all of these rubber tires which are now situated underneath him. Just giving you a one last look of Blackout in his helicopter mode. You can see here we've got some subtle details such as the United States Air Force. This is 4500A instead of 4500X like we saw in the movie. We've got the US Air Force emblem on the sides of Blackout as well. And throughout the figure we do have various different decals, however they are all misspelt. You can see here that instead of saying danger, this says Danya Keek Tabak, so it really doesn't make too much sense. And Blackout here is also terribly misspelt as well. That is obviously to evade infringing on any license agreements, but definitely a really awesome looking helicopter mode. I won't be showcasing the transformation for this particular figure, as it is more or less exactly the same as the Studio Series version, past some of those pieces under the underside. The instruction manual is incredibly easy to follow, so without further ado, let's get this awesome Wei Jiang Blackout transformed from his wicked looking helicopter mode into his awesome looking robot mode with included diorama display base. There is no denying that upon looking at this figure in his robot mode, you can truly gather a sense of how amazing Wei Jiang have done in taking that original Leader Class Studio Series Blackout, which was already a great figure, and have just upscaled it and enhanced it to make it match a masterpiece movie level. This figure really, to me, does look astounding and looks incredibly movie accurate. Now, before we take a more detailed look at the actual figure himself, I'm first of all going to be showcasing you the contents of if you actually buy the Set B version as opposed to the Set A version. In buying the Set B version, you do actually get this entire configuration. Now, this is of course formed out of all of the undercarriage parts that we saw help clean up Blackout's helicopter mode, so that is a great use of engineering and really and truly just a great use of parts. These pieces do detach off of the figure, so I guess in a way you could call this parts forming. However, it does amplify the look of the figure in his robot mode, and I really do like how this overall diorama display base has turned out. Now, this figure does come with an upscaled version of Scorponok. You can see here that this does look very much like how Scorponok looked in the movie, very scorpion in its design. Magnificent detailing, particularly within this entire turbine area. We've also got some nice detailings of these driller pieces that he did have, and his arms are articulated much like the Studio Series version, however now have more hinges within the tail in order for you to get a more dynamic range of motion out of it, and the paint applications have been greatly improved. There is this huge port here that does actually insert onto the diorama display base just to keep Scorponok really locked into place when having him on display. And we also have some miniature army troopers actually firing at the figure, and the diorama display base is also detailed really nice with this sand-like texture, a disused abandoned car, as well as some various other growths out of the ground, some tins and cans, and I love this structure here that seems to be very dilapidated in its design to really match this overall diorama. It's not entirely accurate to what we see in the movie, but considering this is formed out of some undercarriage pieces of the helicopter, I think that Wei Jiang have done a fantastic job in actually making some use of some excess vehicle mode pieces. Now, actually taking a look at Wei Jiang Hide Shadow himself, there is no denying that this figure is an absolute beast. It's almost too big for me to display in its entirety on my camera, but you can see here that the detailing on this is absolutely magnificent, down from this entire turbine area. The head sculpt looks amazing, as well as all this mechanical detailing within his torso, the way the arms clean up, the brand new, newly sculpted engineered hands, which just looks so much more movie accurate than the Kermit the Frog hands that the original Studio Series version had. We've got some great detailing actually within the legs, and just turning around to the back, you can really see how the losing some of that helicopter mode kibble has really tidied up Blackout's back, making him a lot more movie accurate, much like we saw in the movie. It really does look very clean and pristine, and incredibly faithful to the on-screen CGI model. Taking a look at some of the figure's details up close, we can of course see the fantastic looking head sculpt that this figure does in fact sport. I do believe this is just a direct upscale from the Studio Series version, which also had a magnificent looking face sculpt. However, this has just been painted so much better than that original version. We've got all of the different cockpit components that are situated on the actual figure's chest themselves, as well as all these other various gizmos at the top, all really giving him a cool look. As we turn to the arms, which are in fact ratcheted, I'll get more into that into the articulation segment. We've got some fantastically sculpted three-fingered hands, which look so accurate to the movie, particularly when he invades that military base and actually downloads all of the data from that hard drive. That is such a cool scene, and these fingers definitely look very accurate to what we saw within that particular scene. As we move down to the legs of Blackout, we can see here he does have those chicken leg degrade legs, but these have been painted so much more accurate than the Studio Series version, with loads of brass paint and copper paint in order to bring out some of the piston detailing. And they've also implemented some brand new tooling to the actual feet themselves to make them look more abstract and to give them a more realistic and transformed look. I like these additional spring-loaded pieces which spring out once you transform the figure. They just make the legs look as if though they've broken apart a lot more than they actually have. So in terms of detailing, an absolute fantastic looking piece. As we turn our attention to articulation, the figure has got a ball joint at his head, allowing for a great range of motion. Unlike the SS version, this figure does have supreme ratchet joints actually in the arms, allowing them to move forwards and backwards. Rotation just via a swivel at the bicep, ratcheted elbows. All of the fingers can articulate and the wrists can rotate 360, as well as hinge up and down to your own accord. There are also 2 points of articulation on each finger, one at the base and then one in the center. So that is really cool to see. No waist articulation, but this front skirt piece can move out of the way to allow you to kick the figure's legs forwards on ratchet, back all that far, as well as to do the splits. They can rotate on mushroom pegs. There is a ratchet joint here allowing you to kick the legs back and forth, and a ratchet joint here allowing for the same range of motion. And once again, much like the Studio Series version, he has ankle rocker tilts forwards and backwards, as well as back and forth. So just an absolute fantastic figure, and definitely up there with some of the official MPM Hasbro Masterpiece figures. And for some size comparisons, I do have Blackout's legs completely compressed, how they really should be to match the movie. We can see here that he is significantly smaller when compared next to the Unique Toys Dragoon. However, this is an enormous figure, so really and truly the scale between these two is completely thrown out of the window, and both of these are made from different companies. When comparing him to the Studio Series Optimus Prime, surprisingly, I actually think these two may work rather well if you were considering this version of Blackout as even a grinder, so you could have this on your shelf as your stand-in grinder until Hasbro release their own version. I think this scale here works really well and almost looks identical to what we saw in the movie. Perhaps he should be slightly smaller in terms of how broad he is, but in terms of height, I definitely think that that is rather accurate to the film. Optimus was able to swing on his back and actually tear his face into two pieces using the hooks, so this definitely does seem to work rather nicely. So definitely a huge looking piece, despite it being smaller than Dragoon, which is already ridiculously too big and looks absolutely impressive. I still think he has a great presence when on the shelf and really does scale with some of the Masterpiece movie figures perfectly as well. And for a quick size comparison between the official Hasbro Leader Blackout compared next to this upscaled version by Wei Jiang, you can really see that this Leader Blackout almost looks as if though it's a Deluxe or a Voyager when compared next to this humongous, almost Titan class version of Wei Jiang's Hide Shadow. You can definitely see the similarities within the sculpt more noticeably than you could probably tell the differences. However, when looking at this figure more up close and personal like we did in the detail segment of this review, you can really see how some of the improvements from Wei Jiang really do help to enhance this figure, making it completely destroy the Leader class version in terms of movie accurate detailing. So that was my rather brief and compressed review on the Wei Jiang Hide Shadow Set B version of an upscaled movie Blackout from the Studio Series. Personally, if you haven't guessed already from this review, I definitely think that this is a marked improvement from the already fantastic Leader class Blackout from the Studio Series. I think that this figure really does enhance some of those details that we saw in this figure, especially being in a much larger format. The paint apps look a lot more detailed and the overall sculpture too really does pop. I think some of the overall improvements and enhancements that Wei Jiang have incorporated into this figure themselves really does help to set this apart from the Studio Series version, making it just that much more accurate to the movie in order to be aligned with more of your Masterpiece collection. I really think he looks fantastic in both helicopter mode as well as robot mode. I really like the inclusion of utilizing some of the excess helicopter pieces in order to actually recreate a base. So once again, if you are in the market for picking one of these fantastic pieces up, I really recommend that you should check out Showzi's store, and for that there will be links down in the description box below. I hope you enjoyed my review, and if you did, please let me know down also in the comments section below, and until my next review, I'll see you then. Thanks for watching.